So first of all, I would like to say that, to talk about multipolarity, to talk about the decentering of the or the displacement of the United States and more generally Western countries from the being the center of gravity of the world economy does not necessarily require that all the countries become as rich as the United States in terms of GDP, etc. Because I think that already a certain level of productive capacity, of political stability, cohesion, etc., is already enough to prevent the United States from imposing its will on these countries. The United States, I'm sure, the United States has basically lost every war that it has fought, except when it comes to overrunning tiny countries like Grenada or Panama. So in that sense, its ability to subordinate other countries has always been relatively questionable, but nevertheless cannot do it by force or anything. And the United States would today, for example, I'm sure love to overrun Iran or what have you, but they cannot, because the fact of the matter is such a conflict would be too costly and not necessarily winnable. Secondly, I want to elaborate on a point that Michael made. I think that, Michael, I thought your expression empty GDP was a very valid one. I think that there is such a thing as empty GDP. And to your point about healthcare, the example that you gave, I would also like to add, of course, the military-industrial complex. And on top of that, which, does not increase anybody's well-being, but counts massively in, the United States spends some $1 trillion on its military. So that's 1 out of $20 trillion of US GDP is accounted for by this thing that does not really improve anybody's welfare. But in addition to that, I want to draw people's attention to the research of Jacob Asser in particular, who talks about the financialization of GDP and the extent to which in the United States in particular, a combination of the increase of financial activity and certain changes made to the way in which GDP statistics are compiled in the United States, it really exaggerates the size of the US economy. And this this is an important thing that one should keep an attention to. Thirdly, I'd like to say that, in my book, I've tried anyway to see as a good Marxist, as I still consider them myself, although I have criticisms of most of what passes for Marxism as well. But nevertheless, I try to see the contradiction in the picture. From the graphs that you were showing, it was very clear that the United States has been, gaining in GDP and in per capita GDP and what have you. But what's also clear is that a lot of this gain has come at the expense of its so-called allies. And to me, this is also a contradiction, which you are seeing played out right now in Europe, where the United States is asking, and so far European countries seem to be complying in essentially acquiescing in the deindustrialization of Europe, which is quite serious. However, the question remains, how long are ordinary Europeans, but also how long are European capitalists going to necessarily put up with this? I don't know that I know the answer to that, but I think it's an interesting point. And then finally, I'd just like to say that what you don't really, as I've already pointed out by pointing out the need to look at what people like Jacob Asser are saying, on the whole, even when you talk about US corporations, showing how dominant they are. I mean, Michael, you contested this by saying that, the US corporations try not to show profit, but I think this may actually be in Robert's favor. If they are not trying to show profit and then still apparently making so much profit, then Robert's point is further reinforced. But what I would like to say is that actually Nicholas Shaxson in his book Treasure Islands, where he examines the role of all these Bermuda, Bahamas, or wherever, these places where you sequester your money. In this book, he says that, of course, the UK is the biggest treasure island in the world. And I would say that the United States in recent decades has been, on the whole, essentially following a UK-style financialization strategy. And so it has also become a treasure island. So in a certain sense, I would say that it would be interesting to see whether companies do not have a tax incentive in reporting higher profits in the United States. I think that that would also have to be taken into account. And finally, also, this statistic that you are sharing, which is compiled by Forbes, which says, these are the top 2,000 companies and so on. In these top 2,000 companies, this statistic is arrived at, it's from what I understand, by using a combination of assets, size of assets, market value, profits, sales, things like that. But certainly in the calculating the size of assets, and certainly in calculating market value, and possibly also in profits, the role of financialization is not taken into account. I mean, if you see how absurdly high the market valuation of US corporations is today, how completely out of whack it is from the actual value of these corporations and the profitability of these corporations, which we saw particularly during the pandemic when, the economy was tanking and stock markets were going in the other direction. All of this is the result of vast quantities of money creation that we saw. We have seen actually over the last decade and a half since the 2008 financial crisis. And I would say, in fact, going back earlier.
偷偷告诉大家，我最近发现了新法宝 Royal Face 逆时奇迹系列，它有活肤露、全效精华，还有精华霜。尤其我皮肤比较偏干，所以我非常的注重保湿。保湿做得好，肌肤自然烹润。提亮肤色更年轻，抚平皱纹超有感，而且气色变好，用心保养，每天都更美一点。美吧。